If we could come to order, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I am David Bagley, and I am Chair of the Environmental Quality Council. It is January 15th, 2020 at 9 a.m. This meeting is being held by teleconference from the council offices at 2300 Capitol Avenue, Cheyenne, Wyoming, 82002. Present today are, so far, Steve Lenz, Deb Baumer, J.D. Radakovich, and myself. Also present are Jim Ruby, Executive Officer, Joe Girardin, Paralegal, and Ryan Shellhouse from the Attorney General's Office. And just to indicate, the council is required to have at least one meeting a quarter. And so this really is our first meeting, meets our requirement for this quarter. We're always looking for the opportunity to have more meetings, of course, as things come up, but things have been pretty quiet. So this is fulfilling our first quarterly meeting. And that's why as you look at the agenda, it's relatively thin, but some things that we just want to keep moving along. So, do I have a motion to approve the minutes from November 19th, 2019?
Hey, this is John Cora. I make the motion.
All right, thank you. John Cora has joined us. Is there a second?
This is J.D. Radakovich, I second.
Thank you. Any comments? I'm sorry? Megan. Oh, good. Megan has joined us too. Are there any comments, corrections, et cetera, on the minutes of our November meeting? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed signify by saying nay. All right, any abstentions? Hearing none, unanimously approved the minutes. We have approval or a motion to dismiss. There's the order. And this is a case, actually, I believe, Steve, that you are the hearing officer on. It looks like you've done a great job in getting the parties to solve it all without having to come to a hearing.
Well, thank you for what little I didn't do.
So this is docket 19-3201, Water Quality Division issued an NOV and order, and it appears that the parties have reached an agreement. Is there anyone here from DEQ to chat about that?
Mr. Chair, council members, Matt Van Warmer with the Attorney General's Office representing Department of Environmental Quality. I didn't personally work on this matter. Kelly Shaw is out on maternity leave, but I would be happy to try to answer any questions if the council has any settlement request to dismiss the action.
Thank you.
Oh, yes. Last name is V-A-N, capital W-O-R-M-E-R.
Thank you. Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the order of dismissal in docket 19-3201?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Second?
I second.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion on this? I do have just a question. Perhaps you could just give me a brief overview of what was involved in this situation.
Sure, I'd be happy to. On March 20th of 2019, the Water Quality Division issued a notice of violation and order to a company called Riverside RV Park, LLC, operating, as the name implies, an RV park in Douglas, Wyoming. It came to the attention of DEQ that the RV park was operating a public drinking water supply without the permit to do so, and also had an unpermitted wastewater and gray water discharges resulting from occupation at their RV park. After the NOV was issued to Riverside the parties entered into discussion and worked out some options, some directly actions taken by Riverside RV Park, some in conjunction with the city of Douglas to remedy the situation, get the appropriate permits in place to handle wastewater and gray water discharges, make sure that their drinking water supply complied with Department of Environmental Quality rules. So the terms of the settlement address all of the criteria identified in the notice of violation, and the parties are both satisfied that going forward there are further violations at that site. So the parties jointly are requesting dismissal of the petition for review of this violation. There's no enforcement action left at this point.
Great, thank you. So in a way, the system worked the way it's supposed to, right? Something was observed, DEQ got involved, made the notice of violation, the folks remedied the situation satisfactorily. So that's, I don't know, that seems like a good solution.
I think it was a win for everybody.
Great, thank you. Any questions, comments from the council? Hearing none, I will take a roll call vote on this one. And I just have these in a list here, so there's not any particular order. And Mr. Cora,
I vote aye.
Mr. Lenz,
Aye.
Ms. Balmer,
Aye.
Ms. Lally,
Aye.
Mr. Radakovich,
Aye.
I vote aye as well. So the motion to approve has been approved. And so I will, looks like I will sign that. Can I sign that on behalf of Steve Lenz? Okay, thank you. All right, so moving right along. The next thing on the agenda is what we call a case update. And just for everyone to understand what this is, every once in a while, our decisions that the council makes get appealed to various places. And once we make the decision, and my understanding is we really aren't involved any further, but we like to just keep an idea of what's going on if someone is not happy with our decision and it moves on. So I'd like to ask our Attorney General Rep. Ryan Shellhouse to just provide us an update on this case, which is the Brook Mine matter, and where it is in the judicial system.
Thank you, Dr. Bagley. As you recall, I think the council made a decision in this matter, I think it was back in 2017, I think it was some time ago. And then one of the parties appealed the decision to the district court here in Laramie County. And then the district court ultimately made a decision. And then that decision has been appealed to the Supreme Court by, I think, a few of the parties. So it's with the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will ultimately make a decision on the case. There is nothing for the council to do or act upon. The council is not a party to that appeal. It's the parties down below that were in front of the district court, and then the parties in front of the council at that time. So really, at this point, there's nothing for the council to do but just sit and wait. It's up to the Wyoming Supreme Court to ultimately make a decision. And then after the Supreme Court makes a decision, maybe there'll be something at that point for the council to do if it gets remanded. But that's why it's important for the council not to talk to any of the parties. The council has already done what it was supposed to do back in 2017 when it ultimately made its decision. So at this point, there's really nothing to update other than that the case is now with the Wyoming Supreme Court, and I suspect they will make a decision at some point. I don't know if the briefing schedule has been issued, but the parties will brief the matter, and the Supreme Court will ultimately decide it. So there is nothing for the council to do but just sit tight and wait for the Supreme Court to ultimately make a decision.
Thanks, Ryan. Just a couple questions. So we had a very long hearing on that case back in 2017, and all of our materials were then sent up to the district court. Does all that material then also get sent up to the Supreme Court, or you know, just for our interest? Is that what happens?
Yeah, I mean, typically that's what happens. The parties down below that are now in front of the Supreme Court, they will designate portions of the record that they want to move up, but typically it's the full record that was in front of the administrative body and then whatever else in front of the district court. So that's typically how that works.
And so, in a way, our decision in 2017 was we're an administrative body, but just kind of compare it to if we were like the judge or the court initially.
Yeah.
We heard all the evidence, we brought all that stuff forward, and then made a decision. And at this point now, people are just appealing that. And so, like, if we were the judge, we were no longer a party going forward. Our decision's just been appealed, and now upper levels take care of it.
That's exactly right. It's time. The council already did its job when it issued its decision. Now it just sits back. You acted as the adjudicatory body, just like the district court was adjudicatory, the judge when she made her decision, and that got appealed to the Supreme Court. So really, there's nothing to update other than it's in front of Wyoming's highest court, and they will make a decision.
And that by itself is just interesting to us because many of our decisions don't get appealed. So it's just interesting as we also learn about it, how the judicial process works beyond our decisions. Do any council members have any questions? I just have one last question, Ryan. About how long do you think this appeal might take?
To be honest with you, I don't know if the court has issued a briefing schedule. Typically, the parties that appeal file their brief, and then the other party gets 45 days from that date to file their brief. The court can schedule oral arguments, which may happen a month or two following the last brief being filed, and then the Supreme Court can take, anywhere from 3 to 6 to 9 months to issue its decision. So it could be, 6 to 12 months from today. I just don't know if that briefing schedule's been set. The record has to be sent up to the Supreme Court. So I guess I haven't paid that close of attention to where it is in front of the Supreme Court at this time. But it's going to take a while, I would suspect. It's not going to happen tomorrow.
So stay tuned for what may happen.
Hey, Dr. Bagley, I've got a question. When you're ready. And this is only something I've heard, but that company has in the past refiled their permit, or they've modified their permit application to take into account the council's concerns. So they basically have they're doing a do-over, if you will, that I assume is either under review by the Land Quality Division or will be soon. So, and my guess is that that one would get appealed as well. Although I think probably the director would not, if there was an informal conference, that route I think probably would be handled differently. But my question is let's say that the Supreme Court has not heard or made a decision on that appeal, and there is an appeal before the council from an interested party regarding that company's new permit application. Does that existence of the appeal before the Supreme Court, would that impede our ability to process the appeal in any way?
Ryan, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can't even speculate or answer that. I think the council, if something comes before it, it will be addressed, and the parties that are appealing or that are bringing that matter to the council will have an opportunity. But Councilmember Cora, I can't even speculate on that. I mean, really, the council's just supposed to, if something comes in front of it, you address it, either acting as a adjudicatory body. But nothing's, I guess, that situation has not arisen, so I can't even really give you a good answer on that. I believe that would really be up to the parties to make those arguments on what the appeal means at that point, so I can't give you a good answer, Mr. Cora.
Okay, that's okay. It was just it's a hypothetical question anyway, Ryan, and it just came to my mind because if the Supreme Court takes about a year to get to this particular case, I'm pretty sure that mining company is going to, or the DEQ will be making a decision on that mining company's permit in between now and then. And judging from the controversy that you all went through, and I was not a part of it the last time, thank God. But in any event, it was just a hypothetical. So no problem. I appreciate that, Ryan. Thanks.
Any other questions, council members? Well, thanks, Ryan, for providing that. I would like to add an item under, we don't have any reason for an executive session that I'm aware of, but so under other business, I'd like to add an item. Last week, we presented our budget to the Joint Appropriations Committee. Mr. Cora was able to fill in for me. Thank you, John. Would you be able to provide a quick update for the council as to how that went?
Sure. I'm chuckling, but it went pretty well. We were only in front of them for about 20 minutes, I would guess. And Jim, if I'm off anywhere in here, don't hesitate to correct me. But there were two. It was interesting in that before they went overtime with the Public Service Commission before us, so I think they were a little bit tired, but they took a break before we got up. And during the break, Representative Summers from Pinedale came up to me and said, "Hey, look, I've been noticing that you guys pad your budget every year, and then you don't spend the money. And I'm going to be asking you tough questions about that." And I said, "Well, okay." And so when we got into the actual review of the budget, his remark, and for the members of the council, you probably don't have a mental image of this, so I'll just try to describe it, but it's no big deal. The pages that are given to the Joint Appropriation Committee look like a spreadsheet with about 6 or 7 columns in them, and the columns usually have the current biennium budget, the proposed biennium budget, and then what the governor's recommendation is for the budget, and then our final request. On the left-hand side of the spreadsheet, however, is the 17-18 biennium actual spending. And in the categories that deal with our travel and our hearing costs, we spent in actuality about $60,000-$70,000 in 17-18, and we're on track to spend only that amount in this current biennium. But we're asking for a couple $100,000. In other words, we're asking for about $130,000 more in that category. And we've done it every biennium because what we don't want to do is be caught short and not have the money to conduct a hearing or deal with events that are essentially unplanned or you can't foresee. Examples of that in the past would be coal bed methane issues that were coming up right and left back in the day. Another example of that could be the hearing you had in Sheridan relative to that permit we just got through talking about. But so typically the council budgets for more money because we have these tight hearing timelines. And if we run out of money and somebody comes up and you got to hold a hearing in 20 days and you don't have the money to do it, you got a difficult scramble. So we explained that to them, and I thought most of the members of the committee understood. And when I told them that we revert the money back at the end of the biennium anyway, that seemed to satisfy a few of the council members, that seemed to satisfy most of the committee members. So where that ends up, I don't know, but Summers seemed to be satisfied with our response, and we were totally honest about it. I mean, I said, hey, look, it kind of looks like a pad, but it's really a contingency thing, and we need to have the money to have a hearing if one comes up. So we'll see if they revise our budget downward when they do their deliberations, which really won't take place till probably towards the end of January. So that was one. The other one was a statement in our write-up, and I don't know who, and Dave Bagley, you'll have to maybe chime in on this, but if there are any questions. We only had one priority in our write-up, and I don't know who wrote this up, but the priority was to give Jim and the EQC staff merit increases for this year. And that raised a whole lot of eyebrows on the committee, and Representative Lloyd Larson out of Riverton, or Lander, pushed us pretty hard about, well, didn't they already get raises, and what is this going to amount to, and is, and he kind of pushed us a little bit, but we told him that the amount, which I think was $14,000, was not in our proposed budget. And so it maybe is a moot point. I don't think it'll come back on us, but I just have to say that they were, they said, hey, the state already gave employees raises this year and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, that question came up, and that was essentially it. I think we were reasonably well received, and it went pretty well. They thanked us, and we left. That's it.
Well, thank you, John. Jim, point?
There's two things that have happened since that meeting yesterday. The committee, the JAC, started to work their budget, and we came up toward the end of the day, and a bunch of others, and a bunch of the smaller agencies, and they took action. They approved the governor's recommendation. That doesn't mean there won't be action later, but at this stage, they left our budget alone. And then also, the governor sent a letter to the JAC yesterday recommending a 2.5% raise, or roughly, it's $20 million for basically COLAs for state employees. So that's the current action by the governor and by the JAC with regards to our budget.
Yeah. Hey, Dr. Bagley, let me mention one more thing. And Jim, that's good news, by the way. But the other, another question that came up when we were talking about the salaries was, it was a question, and this came from Senator Hicks. The question came up as well, have you done a study to find out what those people really do? And it was, and so both Jim and I were very happy and pleased to be able to say, yes, we have. And we went through I went through the brief summary of our history as a result of the legislation 2 years ago, where we evaluated staffing needs and so on. And that seemed to be a pretty satisfactory answer for the committee. We did commit to, and Jim was already forwarded a copy of our joint EQC report. So it's just an FYI. I don't know that we'd get any questions on it at this stage, but just be aware that that committee, it now has a copy of that report that we put together and submitted to Minerals Committee last year.
No, thank you, John.
Yeah, so that's it.
Any questions from council members? All right, good. So our budget appears to be underway, and of course, more excitement in store when the legislature starts meeting, perhaps. Speaking of the legislature, another item I'd like to just add in under other business. You may recall back in November, we received a draft of a potential bill affecting, 3511-406, which is the part of the law related to, not surprisingly, mining permits for coal. And I think everyone received that, has had a chance to look at it. I just wanted to ask, has anybody heard anything else about this? I haven't heard anything else about this. We received it to see if it had any effect on our budget. The answer was no. Jim, do you have any additional information?
Yesterday, I reviewed the pre-introduced bills, and it's not in there yet.
It's not in there.
I
Okay.
anticipate it will be at some point, but it has not been put out for publication as a introduced bill on the legislative website.
Okay. Okay. So if it gets introduced, then it will come before some committee, and we'll make sure we have someone there to provide our thoughts on it. Has anybody had a chance to look at it? Have any thoughts about it at this point?
Well, this John, I do, but we'll see how this all turns out. The essence of the bill is to sort of make the director have an informal conference, and for any decisions that he makes out of that conference be appealable to the council. Right, Jim? That's one of the big pieces.
It's the last portion that you stated is what I consider unclear in the bill as to whether or not his actual decisions within the informal conference can be considered, or just that the overall decision that was the subject of the informal conference could be then just moved on to the council. It may be both.
Yeah. So anyway, it's just disappointing to me because, my experience with that is over quite a number of years. And I always felt that the informal conference was an opportunity for sort of an alternative dispute resolution process, where somebody that was not happy with the decision of the director could, on the mining side especially, could have an informal conference with the director to try to resolve something. And it was always vague, but typically that was just sort of aside from the regular formal appeals process. So, I personally, I think this could end up making more work for the council down the road because the director hears a lot of different topics in informal conferences. But that's just my comment. So we'll, like Dr. Bagley says, you have to see how it gets debated in committee, and even if it gets to the floor.
Thanks, John. As I read through it, it looked to me like an attempt to provide some clarity on the issue that is now in front of the Supreme Court, actually, because this was the section of the law that provided the council a lot of thought. We had to think hard about this in the Brook Mine case, and so that's kind of what it looks like to me. And I guess to the extent that it actually provides clarity or not, it's something that would have to be we can look at if it even comes to the floor. That's how I interpreted it, John, is they were trying to, because the way the law was currently worded, we struggled with it. And obviously, if it's been appealed to the district court and out of the Supreme Court, it's possible that there's some confusion that might need to be addressed. Okay. So the last item on my list here is timely, falls right after your comments, John, about pay and everything else. And this is the reclassification of our executive officer, Jim Ruby. And so just as a backup reminder for folks, the council approved last summer that we give pay raises, merit raises, to both our staff, and they're is a, here we go, a form. We're doing that, called the, let's see if I can find it in my files here, the request for pay approval. We prepared that and submitted that on behalf of Joe Gerardin. We submitted that to the Department of Administration and Information with our request for a pay raise that we'd approved, and that was approved. So Joe did get a additional merit raise on top of the one that the state provided last year to all state employees. So that was great news. We then did the same thing. I prepared that form and sent it in to the Department of Administration and Information on behalf of Jim. That was denied, that request. And the reason it was denied is that Jim's classification, his pay, is beyond the upper limit of that classification. And so by really, the Department of Administration and Information is just following its procedures and say, look, if someone's in a classification and they're already paid above the top level, well, we can't authorize an additional merit raise. And so the next step on in that for us to pursue is, well, perhaps Jim's just classified wrong and should be in a classification that has a higher upper end, so that he is eligible for additional merit raises. I believe Jim did receive the adjustment from last year. Is that correct, Jim? That all city employees got?
Yeah.
On the first 80,000,
Yep.
Right? That everyone got.
Yep.
So that's where we're at now. Is and I've been working on that. And so what I sent to you Sunday, after I finally finished it, was a draft of the next step, and this is what's called a job content questionnaire. And in that, what we are going to be asking is really the Department of Administration and Information to look at this and say, is the classification Jim's in really appropriate for the things that we do or that he does? And so to give you a little background on how I prepared this, one of the first things I did was read that document that John referenced, our report on that we sent to the Joint Minerals Committee over a year ago, and that we now have sent to the Joint Appropriations Committee, where we evaluated and made recommendations on the efficiency and adequacy of Environmental Quality Council staffing. And since we've done a thorough review at that point, it was a good starting point to look at what are the duties of the executive officer. And then I looked at the document I prepared, the request for pay approval, because I've already written some things in there as well, and looked at that. And then Jim had prepared a draft last summer, and I looked at his draft. And then I looked at the materials from when Jim was hired and what the position was requested at that point. And so kind of trying to blend all those together, I took a crack at this job content questionnaire. And so what I would like to do is get your, first, your thoughts. Have I missed anything? Have I gone too far? Or is this how you as council members, these are things that you feel our executive officer does and should do? And then after that, get your approval, if appropriate, to then pursue this and take it up to A&I and have them, I would work with Jim and A&I to have them do their full examination of a reclassification. That doesn't mean a reclassification will occur, but this is the next step to make sure that we've just got Jim in the right job classification. So that's some background on this. Are there any, I guess at this point, any thoughts as to sort of the things I put in there? Am I just completely out of line? Have I captured appropriately, or is there some suggestions for improvement?
It looks good. Thank you for all your work, Dr. Bagley.
Oh, thanks, Megan.
Yeah, this is John, Dr. Bagley. I thought it was well done. I know you put a lot of work into it, so thank you.
Oh, thank you, John.
And Dr. Bagley, this is Steve. I, as one of the newer members to the board, don't have a great background on all that comes before the board, but what I could tell from what you read, I've already commented in my reply email, but I'm in agreement. I like what you did.
Thank you, Steve.
And this is JD. I could echo what everyone else has said. I know, you know, in my role here, probably one of the hardest things that a manager has to do, or in a leadership position, is come up with job descriptions and really be creative and thoughtful about it. And the time and energy it takes to do that is not inconsequential. So appreciate you doing that, and you know, hopefully everything will work out. So thank you very much.
Great, thanks, JD. So do I have a motion then to authorize the EQC chair to proceed with submitting this and working with A&I to conduct the reclassification exercise?
So move.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Do we need just a voice vote on this one, right, Jim? Yeah, okay, thank you. So all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed signify by saying nay. Any abstentions? All right, thank you. Motion is passed, and I will begin working with Jim and A&I to continue this process using the document that I shared with you the other day. Is there any other business that anyone's aware of? Everyone's waiting to say, will he let us adjourn? All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second.
All right, thanks. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Good. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned, and we're in pretty good shape. I'm not aware of anything coming up soon. So thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.